Okay, excellent. Well, thank you again, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on dynamic digital signage, balancing safety and traffic flow. It's great to see so many people joining us today, as always, and we appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to attend. My name is Harrison, and I'm the account manager here at Bermuda Digital. Just before we get started, on the right-hand side of your panel, you do have a questions tab. So any questions that come to mind during the presentation, please post them there, and at the end, we'll have time to address all your questions. And another reminder, as always, we have our quiz. This will be at the end of the presentation, so please pay attention, and you'll have your opportunity to get a Bermuda Digital prize near the end. So today, we have a really exciting topic prepared. Digital blankout signs have been in the market for quite some time, and they've been typically restricted to advisory signs that are supporting static signage. So today we're going to look at that standard use case of a digital blankout sign supporting static signage, and we're also going to take a look at a new concept called dynamic no right-hand turn on red, and other dynamic applications, which mean removing the static signage and enforcing the digital sign. So just to reiterate, use case one is going to be on your standard turn control blankout sign supported by static signage, and then use case two is a new concept, dynamic no right-hand turn on red and other dynamic applications. At the end of the webinar, we'll get into a Q&A period where I'm sure you'll have lots of questions, but be sure to include them in the questions tab there, and we'll have a chance to get through all of them at the end of the webinar. So very quickly, I know everybody here already knows us. We're Bermuda Digital, part of the Bermudan Canada family of companies, which includes Stinson, Bermuda Digital, Bermuda Services, Bermuda Rentals. Of course, we are the intelligent transportation and technology-focused company in the group. But together, we form a very strong core company which can really handle any of your traffic needs regarding traffic control, digital solutions, manufacturing, and distribution. Within our team, we have a whole wide variety of experienced professionals who work with the Canadian market and understand your unique challenges. And we've been in the blankout sign, digital signage market for quite some time now. We're pioneering new innovations that will improve upon the existing technology that's been used for blankout signs, while enabling municipalities to engage in new applications with digital signage, like dynamic operation. So the goal here with this webinar is to show you some new ways to use your digital signage through dynamic applications, but also show you how this technology can improve upon the way you're currently doing things. So if you're using blankout signs to support static signage, we're going to show you how our digital signs can improve flexibility with your existing signs by reducing your inventory requirements, improving the way you can substitute signs, and ideally reduce your overhead and improve operations, maintenance, and everything related to your current inventory of signs. So I'm going to get into the first use case here, and this is really going to highlight the standard operation of blankout signs, how they're being used right now, what technology is behind their current uses, and how we can improve upon the way we're currently doing things. So for anyone that's not familiar, a blankout sign is a dynamic electronic sign that illuminates an LED legend, typically restricting a turning movement for a specific time of day. And this is the blankout sign right here. Blankout signs, their ultimate goal is to improve compliance by drawing the driver's attention to the prohibited movement. And in the majority of cases, it's a turn control sign. And it's used to enhance a static sign restriction. So here's the static sign right here, which is typically the enforced sign, and the blankout sign here is illuminating that restriction, drawing attention to it, and ensuring drivers actually notice the restriction. So in Ontario, the city of Toronto was really the first municipality to widely deploy these blankout signs. And during their time, they did conduct some very deep studies to prove the effectiveness. And one in particular was done in 2024 along the King Street streetcar route. And this is the statistics you're seeing on your screen here. And what they noticed over months of analyzing the signs is they had a very impressive 48 overall improvement in compliance to the left-hand turn restrictions. And since this study was conducted, the city has rolled out over 100 turn control blankout signs, of varying sizes and shapes, because as regulated, any of these regulated signages here can be turned into an electronic blankout sign. This is according to our Highway Traffic Act. And so, when we first entered the blankout sign market, the digital signage market, we looked at this and basically said, wouldn't it be great if there was one sign that could account for all the possible approved types of blankout signs you could have on the market. So right now, in the past, this type of technology was a bit cost prohibitive. It was still quite new, and during this time, fixed blankout signs sort of dominated the market due to their cost. And there are some drawbacks with the fixed blankout sign. And they just to give you a bit of a background here, these fixed blankout sign boards, they include a preset pattern of LEDs, and these LEDs illuminate when the turning restriction is effect. The main drawback here is, once you purchase a fixed LED board, there really is no way to change that preset pattern of LEDs. You're sort of stuck with what you purchased. So if you wanted to restrict a wide variety of different turning movements in your municipality, inevitably to buy a wide variety of fixed LED boards. And the primary complaint we're hearing from municipalities regarding these fixed boards is that, once I have an inventory of fixed message boards that are different patterns, I need to carry spare inventory for each pattern. And so let's say I have 6 different boards within my municipality, and now I need to carry 6 different spare types to support any failures in the field. That's 6 times the amount of inventory I would have, instead of carrying one digital board, which can recreate essentially any turning movement. So just right there, considering the cost difference is now marginal between a fully programmable option and fixed board, switching or starting your blankout sign the journey with a programmable digital board will reduce your inventory requirements exponentially. And as I said previously, programmable digital signage was initially, when it entered the market, was slightly cost prohibitive, but now it's gone to the point where the 2 options are nearly identical in cost. Programmable digital signage addresses nearly all the shortcomings of fixed LED signage. And our partner Chain Zone manufactures NEMA TS4 EN12966 compliant digital boards, which are true full matrix LEDs displays. This means there are no clustered LEDs. Each individual LED on our board can be programmed to generate detailed signs, images, animations, or graphics with, again, no clustering of the LEDs, which is why we can create, such detailed graphics in any size, shape, or form. And also, what's unique about these Chain Zone boards is the density of the LEDs. The LEDs are 10 millimeterly spaced apart. So that means every 10 millimeters is a new LED. On a 64 by 64 centimeter board, you would have over 4,000 individual LEDs creating very clear, crisp images like the one you see behind me here. This is our 64 by 64 centimeter board, and it is just cycling through some typical turning movement images right now. But this board is again, it's quite cost effective. It's about the same price as a fixed LED board, but it can support multiple graphics. And it really does reduce the inventory burden when you're switching from a fixed inventory to a digital inventory. Additionally, these boards are can be NTCIP controlled. They support an onboard LTE web interface and NTCIP control out of the box. You just have to connect it to one of your modems. And that means you can monitor the sign remotely. So if anything does happen, you can get a failure alert through the modem, or you can just monitor the sign to make sure that it's posting the correct messages, or you can remotely upload messages to the board should you want to change the restriction that's being presented. What's also unique about this board in particular is they include a built-in 3-degree down tilt. So just to visualize what that looks like, if you were to mount our board on a pole, you wouldn't need to tilt it down to for drivers to see it, because drivers are viewing this board at a roughly 3-degree angle. Our boards have that angle built into them. So your contractor, your municipal staff only need to mount the board flush to the pole or the arm, and the drivers will automatically see the restriction being posted because of that built-in 3-degree down tilt. And that might be why you're seeing this board a little darker than it should be. It's because of that down tilt. And we really decided to standardize on 3 primary sizes to support blankout sign applications. The first size that I have here highlighted in red, that's our 64 centimeter by 64 centimeter board, and that's the one board you're seeing behind the cycle through the various turning restrictions. This model is excellent for posting anything related to your standard turning movement restrictions, RB12, RB11. It's 64 by 64 centimeters. The RB12 sign is 60 by 60 centimeters. So you can comfortably post that sign within our board, and we'll configure the display and just perhaps disable a few pixels to make sure that sign matches exactly to the size of the regulatory sign. The sign is very lightweight, approximately 30 kilograms. It's front door accessed, IP65 compliant, can be controlled by NTCIP, and can connect to your traffic controller through AC inputs. So that, the features of this board are quite similar to the other 2 sizes that we have here. We have a 80 by 64 centimeter board and a 96 by 64 centimeter board. Again, these are, commonly used sizes for various signage, where we're posting 64 by 60 by 60 signage on the 64 by 64 board. We're posting signage like the RA5 on the 80 by 64 or the RB79R on the 96 by 64 centimeter board. The statistics are all the same in terms of pixel pitch, NTCIP compliance, the 3-degree down tilt. The only thing that really changes between these boards is the size and the weight. So speaking on inventory management, we have a really great case study with the City of Calgary I want to highlight. So the City of Calgary use a variety of fixed LED boards currently at their intersections, and these range from no left turn, no right turn, no left turn during LRT phase, and in total they have roughly 20 unique signs in their inventory. So because of this, the city carried so many different varieties of blankout signs in their inventory, they were finding it inconvenient to manage the sheer quantity of spare systems needed to replace failed units. So they reached out, and we've provided a couple signs to them, around 3 signs so far. And currently they're undergoing environmental testing, and they're being deployed at active intersections. And so far everything's been moving smoothly. But I just wanted to show you a couple of these images right now of the signs installed. And this is what it looks like when installed. So incredibly bright, super high resolution. They look phenomenal on the pole when you're driving underneath them, and you can really get that 3-degree down tilt as a driver. But the real end game here, the real goal that we wanted to work with Calgary on is to help them manage their inventory. Eventually start using this type of board across the network, and have them only carrying one type of sign rather than managing a massive inventory of spare units to replace their fixed signs when they may fail. So just to really recap what we talked about in this first section, the primary difference between the fixed boards, the legacy technology, and our new fully programmable boards really is graphic uploads and animations. We can upload any type of sign, any type of graphic to our chain zone boards, and we can provide these boards in nearly any size. They're modular boards. They're made up of individual LED panels, and those panels are put together to make the sizes of our boards. We support high resolution, detailed graphics with a very high pixel pitch. They're true full matrix, no LED clustering, and of course, they're almost the same price as the fixed LED boards. These are nearly identical in price. So there really is a strong argument for just upgrading your inventory or migrating inventory slowly towards the full matrix digital version to reduce the burden of your inventory and be able to provide some very high resolution, good looking graphics for your community. The second case, and this is the really interesting case, something we've been working on for years, and it's really dynamic no right-hand turn on red. So I want to just start this off by introducing the concept of no right turn on red. And it really is a proven tool for improving safety for both pedestrians and motorists. But however, one of my main gripes with no right-hand turn on red is the blanket approach that some municipalities take with this, and that's putting the no right-hand turn red signage up as a static sign at really any intersection that receives some sort of complaint, and it really just turns into a lot of frustration and driver delays caused by the static signage. And we understand it's a safety tool, and ideally we want to promote safety for pedestrians for conflicting movements. But the sad reality is that these signs go up and it causes so much driver frustration and complaints that it leads to the removal of very important safety infrastructure. And I can attest to this myself. I work on Martin Grove and Highway 7, and making that right-hand turn in the morning on the red was not an issue until the no right-hand turn on red signage was erected. And I noticed a noticeable increase in my travel time, just that last little mile getting into work because of the no right-hand turn on red signage that was put there. And I'm sure other drivers can feel similar frustrations, which is why we really need a solution that can strike a balance between safety and efficiency. And this leads us to what I'm most excited to talk about today, and that's dynamic no right-hand turn on red. So just to briefly explain, instead of applying like a blanket restriction through static signage, dynamic no right-hand turn on red uses the digital blankout sign to activate the restriction when a specific condition, maybe a specific traffic phase is active or a specific time of day plan is active. So this means that the condition is active during the most high risk periods. But then when those periods pass, the sign is blank. So this means you're receiving full safety benefits from the sign during your highest risk periods, while prioritizing network efficiency when the restriction is not longer in effect. So again, this is the method which is going to take into the consideration the delays and queue lengths that are occurring because of the static no right-hand turn signage, but also prioritize safety benefits for pedestrians for conflicting turning movements. Now, the main problem with this application is in the past, there really wasn't a consensus on enforcement. We really weren't sure whether this application was enforceable. No one really went out and did the research, did the groundwork to convince the courts that something like this could be enforced. However, recently, there have been some, again, some very exciting developments on the legality of dynamic no right-hand turn on red. And the region of York is actively taking the lead on this. So at a recent Greater Toronto Area ITS Summit, the region of York presented this use case in a very interesting demonstration. And essentially, they've been exploring dynamic no right-hand turn on red solutions and have conducted a very extensive legal review with their courts and bylaw department. And this is to determine how an electronic dynamic no right-hand turn on red sign could be enforced. The basis for the region's argument was based on the Highway Traffic Act Regulation 615, Section 49. And to summarize, it states, so long as the dynamic sign is erected in accordance to Section 21, 22, 23, and 34, and this is essentially the subsection for turn signs, U-turn signs, lane designation signs, and that electronic sign is internally illuminated and matches the corresponding regulatory sign as practically as possible, then the dynamic equivalent is enforceable. So the York Region Courts agreed with this interpretation and will be enforcing non-compliance violations for dynamic no right-hand turn on red signage. They now have a bylaw in place specifically for this application, and cops will be ticketing based on non-compliances. So this is a really exciting development, and it opens up a lot of potential safety solutions, which will, again, prioritize safety, but also support network efficiency. I just want to highlight the details of this pilot that we worked with the region on. So this was our sign that we provided the region, and it was installed at Langstaff and Islington Road. And the sign was installed here, right over here on this corner. And it's meant to restrict this right-hand turn movement when these two protected left-hand turns are in effect during the AM and PM peak. So this is interesting because it's not a static sign. It's not constantly restricting the movement. It's only activating when these two protected movements activate. When the most potential for critical conflicts occurs is when they're making a left, they're expecting to have the right of way, and then someone decides to make a right-hand turn with the red signal. And then, just based on their assessment of this pilot, this is where the majority of the critical conflicts were occurring. Well, putting up the blank out sign, not only reduced those critical conflicts, it also had an incredible compliance rate, and it didn't affect, the network efficiency to a great degree. So, you're getting the best of both worlds with this application. Had they put up a static sign, it may have been removed due to a ton of citizen complaints coming in on a very busy route. So just looking at some of the findings, these are again provided by the Region of York. I had an overall compliance of 99%. Over the static signage, they had improvements in AM peak delays of 51 seconds, PM peak delays of 40 seconds, and they had average queue length improvements of 31 meters for the PM peak, for the AM peak, and 35 meters for the PM peak. They had a massive reduction in critical conflicts, a very positive public response, and now they're moving to a large-scale rollout for intersections, specifically with dual left-hand turn intersections, high pedestrian intersections, and school zones. So with the success of this pilot, we're really hoping to see the concept of dynamic no right-hand turn on red really take hold in the York Region and begin to remove some of those static signs to improve network efficiency and prioritize safety at the same time. I just want to touch on the regulation one more time here because I thought it was really fascinating, and it puts more emphasis behind digital signage, because not all technologies can adequately replicate regulatory signs. You first need to match the size of the regulatory sign. Then you need to match the exact graphic that is being produced in color, and you need to have an illuminated background. So you must have a white background as well. So to comply to the Highway Traffic Act Regulation 615, you need a very specific type of sign. And again, that's where our chain zone sign really comes in handy, because we're full color, so we can replicate any color on our sign. We can replicate unique details like this black border here you're seeing, and we can replicate the graphic of the turn restriction and the signal head in exact detail as the RB79R. So the region will wants to use this sign particularly because of these features. And of course, if we were to replicate a different sign, we would build a sign or provide a different model of sign. As you saw previously, we have signs for your standard turn restriction signs. We have signs that can support RA12, RA5s, and of course we have our 96 by 64 sign, which can very comfortably fit the RB79R. Of course, if any of you or any municipalities that are on this call right now, want to explore dynamic no right-hand turn on red or dynamic applications, then we advise you to consult with your bylaw department, to consult with your courts, and you can use the Region of York as a reference to what their findings were. And I think there's a lot of potential here to unlock some very unique safety applications, which will inevitably improve efficiency and improve traffic safety. But right now, I just want to, again, hammer home the point on this application specifically and show you some technologies that might be close to a regulatory enforceable sign for no right-hand turn on red, but not quite there. For instance, looking at this sign here, it's a fixed LED sign. Is this enforceable for dynamic no right-hand turn on red? This is reconstructing a turn restriction sign. So first of all, it's not the correct sign type. It's not the RB79R that it's replicating. It's the RB11, and it's not the right color. It's red with a white arrow, which should be red with a black arrow, and it should be fully colored in. Secondly, in Regulation 16, only the no right-hand turn on red, the RB79R, is allowed for prohibiting a right-hand turn at a signalized intersection during the red indication. So the regulations state pretty clearly that you need to have an RB79R to enforce dynamic no right-hand turn on red. Unfortunately, this is not an RB79R replication. It doesn't match the color, it doesn't match the substrate, it doesn't match the dimensions, therefore it's not enforceable for dynamic no right-hand turn on red. And then we look at another sign. Well, this looks very similar to the RB79R. I mean, you've got the exact same signage here, but is it enforceable for dynamic no right-hand turn on red? The main problem we're having with this sign is the color is off. They don't have an illuminated background. It's a black background. So that is the main concern here. You have to have the exact same style of the RB79R. You must replicate it exactly in its entirety. So for this to be regulatory, you'd have to change the color scheme. You'd have to change the background to white, and the animation on this and the legend of the sign to black with the red stripe through. So this is not enforceable for no right-hand turn on red. And we come to this sign, and of course, this is enforceable for dynamic no right-hand turn on red. According to the Region of York, it's an exact replication of the RB79R. It matches the dimensions, 60 by 90. It's a matching regulatory sign, as you can clearly see. It includes the white background, includes the black border. If you really want to look in there, there's a very slight black border there. It's a high enough resolution, so there's no ambiguity in what the sign is saying to drivers. And according to the Region of York, this is enforceable for dynamic no right-hand turn on red. And what was also interesting about this regulation, if we read it, to its entirety, and according to the York Region's interpretation, dynamic applications are not just restricted to no right-hand turn on red. As long as the sign is found in section 21, 22, 23, and 34, this includes, again, the turning restriction signs, the U-turn signs, etc. Then these signs can be used in a dynamic application. You just have to ensure that you match the dimensions of the sign you're trying to recreate, you match the white background, you match the black border, and of course the regulatory sign matches the sign you're trying to create. And that's where our boards, again, are perfect for this application. You can see we can take any sign really here and we can turn it into a digital recreation of a regulatory sign. So not only are our boards superior in terms of quality of life, inventory management, we can also recreate regulatory signage down to the exact detail and enable municipalities to engage in these dynamic applications. So not only just for right-hand turn on red, I mean, there are a wide variety of different safety applications a municipality could engage upon. For instance, turning on a left-hand turn restrictions based on the presence of higher traffic volumes, or perhaps based on the presence of higher near-miss conflicts, activating based on the presence of higher pedestrian volumes. So there's a whole host of dynamic applications that are just waiting to be explored that are possible now with this great work that the Region of York has undertaken. And of course, all our signs, like I said before, they're modular, so we can build them in a wide variety of custom sizes. They're full color, customizable graphics. They allow for exact signage recreation. They have high pixel density. And even more importantly, if you are using these signs without static signage, there will be some questions on redundancy. What if a sign fails in the field? There are ways that we can support this, of course. One of the ways is through our detailed event log, which allows for a historical review of sign activity. So if you have this sign connected to your network, we can configure an alert to tell you when the sign is down. And we can look at a log, which will show you when it was active and when it was not active. So if anyone comes to you and says, hey, the sign, it wasn't active, it wasn't working when I was ticketed, well, you can go back, even if you aren't connected to the internet with our board, you can run through the log of the sign, see when it was active, and provide a readout of that activity log for the courts to prove the sign was active when the driver disobeyed the turning restriction in our hypothetical case. Of course, if you just have this sign active with no static supporting signage, there will also be calls on redundancy. So what if the sign fails? That is, I'm not going to tell you it's not a possibility. It is a small possibility that a sign could fail. And in those situations, perhaps it's good to have a second sign for redundancy, to include two signs, one on each side of the intersection. So there are some ways that you can get around having or working account for potential failures or potential arguments from citizens who are trying to argue that the sign was off. And that can be done through historical logs and added redundancy at the intersection, or as well monitoring the sign over NTCIP to ensure it's still active and working. And coming back to our standard signs, again, we have the 64 by 64, the one behind me, ideal for recreating your standard turning movement signs. The 80 by 64, ideal for recreating a RA5R if you wanted to. And of course, this 96 by 64 sign, which is the perfect size for recreating the RB79R for dynamic right-hand turn on red. This sign is approximately 40 kilograms, which is quite light still in looking at respects for other sign products on the market. It includes 8 AC input channels like the rest of our signs, and of course is EN 12966 and NEMA TS4 compliant. That's all our signs. Okay, so we're getting close to the end of our presentation, but we have the quiz question remaining. So I hope everybody was paying attention. We're going to get into our quiz now. So yeah, so I'll just read this out here quickly. You got to enter the first multiple choice question. It's multiple choice, so just enter the letter that corresponds to the correct answer. And this is the question. Which of the following features is not required for a dynamic sign to be legally enforceable? So I'll read that one more time. Which of the following features is not required for a dynamic sign to be legally enforceable? So just enter the corresponding letter for the correct answer when it appears, and it's going to appear in 3, 2, 1.
So we do have immediate right answers.
Excellent, excellent.
People were paying very good attention.
Oh, good.
Michael was there was a lot in almost at the same time, but Michael was first. So I'll contact you afterwards to get your shipping address, and then we'll send you the prize.
Very good. Yes, very good. Yeah, just looking at that question one more time, thickness and weight, there isn't a That's not a feature required for legality or enforceable legality. However, it is nice to have a sign which is, not too thick and not too heavy, and which is again a great feature of these chain zone signs is that they're not boxy. They're quite thin and light on the pole. They're very easy to maneuver, and we include brackets with each of our signs, can brackets with the cables, so they're quite straightforward to install. And comparing to other larger products on the market, we have a fairly low profile. And again, with that 4-degree built-in, 3-degree built-in down tilt, your field crews won't be spending a lot of time realigning this on the pole. Basically, put it up, make sure it's level, make sure it's square, and then drivers can immediately see the restrictions in effect from their car. Excellent. So I'm glad everyone was paying attention, and thank you for that. We're getting into the Q&A section of the presentation, and I expect there will be some good questions for us today. Yeah, feel free to put any questions you have in the questions tab, and we'll answer them. And if not, feel free to email myself after the presentation. My email is here on the screen, harrison.mcdonald@remudigital.ca. We will be circulating a recording of the webinar and a copy for anyone interested, for all participants today. So yeah, thank you again.
The first question is, are these MTO compliant?
MTO compliant, that's a great question. So right now, when you mean MTO compliant,
well, maybe I'll jump in there because I don't think we know the answer per se, to be honest, and Ivan, Michael. So the short answer is we don't know. What we know is what York has gone through as far as the review. The signs are MUTCD compliant. They are NTCIP compliant, the communication protocol, which MTO uses for all their ATMS. And the LEDs and the BMS themselves are NEMA TS4 compliant, which is the BMS standard for North America, and EN 12966 compliant, which is the European LED standard. So we know it complies with those standards, and whether MTO would agree with the legal opinion from York, or if there's some secondary bylaws. I believe the HTA is the primary, guiding document for the MTO. So it would really come down to the MTO's kind of interpretation of the legal opinion that York arrived at. So I can't say for sure. I know there's different interpretations of law. So my hope is that the MTO would be interested in this type of application and would investigate this themselves. We have a very strong feeling that it would be based on our experience and what York came back with, but we can't say for sure. But all signs point very positively in a good direction. Are you muted, Tim?
Someone asked, can you use a no right turn sign and turn it on and off for the right turn during the red signal restrictions, or it has to be the big one?
Great question. So it really depends. If you want to use this with corresponding static signage, then you can use really any sign. As long as the static signage is present on the pole, then the static sign is enforced, and your blankout sign is just to draw the driver's attention. However, if you are to engage in a legal review with your bylaw department or your courts, then and they were to approve an application that does not involve static signage, then you would have to use the sign with the signal and the right-hand turn with the X through it, called the RB7 NR. So it really depends. If you're looking to run a dynamic application, then you need to go with, and it's been regulated, you have to go with the RB7 NR. But if you want to run an application that includes static signage, then you can use something like this. The one that some you see behind me, that's posting the RB12 or RB11.
Yes, that's the most interesting kind of development that we kind of came through as we were preparing for this webinar, is that when I had seen the presentation from York at first last month, I thought it was only a legal reviewer on the no right turn on red, but it seems like it applies to all these movement restriction signs, and that obviously opens up a whole new world of possibilities for traffic signal operators. And so that's a very good question, because that's the key distinction is you can still use what seems like small 60 by 60 signs to restrict no left, no right, no U-turn, et cetera, combination movements, but you can't enforce that on a red signal only basis. So where I would see that being used is during like a time of day restriction. So if you had, say, during the AM peak and the PM peak, you're going to turn on that right turn or left turn restriction for 3 or 4 hours a day, then that's the correct use of the dynamic sign. But if you wanted it to be only on red, you can't just have it come up on the red signal for that specific approach and have it be enforceable, because it's not clear to the driver that the signal is relevant to that movement. So that was one finding that came back from York's review, is to say if you want it specific to that signal phase and not general across all phasing, then you need to use the larger, which includes the legend, to make it clear that the red signal is relevant to the movement restriction.
Can you mount these VMS on the signal arm, or does it need to be on the vertical portion of the pole?
Yeah, no, you can mount these on a signal arm or the vertical portion of the pole. We would advise mounting it closer to the pole if you're going on the signal arm, just to balance the weight a little bit better. Just for reference, this sign behind me is 30 kilograms. We supply it with a can bracket, and that can be mounted on the signal arm or the vertical pole.
But of course, you guys got to do your own structural analysis on the type of poles you use. And but in our experience, we've seen the traditional LED blankout signs used in that fashion across standard signal arms in Toronto and in the New York region. So we anticipate it won't be a major issue with kind of typical traffic poles that are used, but it's going to vary based on what you guys have and the specs of your poles. But certainly if it's on the vertical portion, no problem, I'm sure. Once you start getting way out towards the signal head itself, I definitely look and do a kind of an analysis of the static load and the wind loading based on your pole specifications.
Is this used for curbside enforcement signs anywhere currently?
No, is the short answer. You might see behind me, there's a super high resolution version of the same sign. So the sign that Eric's been talking about today is a 10 millimeter pixel pitch, which means the space between the pixels is 10 millimeters. So when we have 64 by 64 pixels, it's 64 by 64 centimeters. And so for this sign here, this is a 3 millimeter pixel pitch. So we have a 3 times smaller pixel pitch, which means something like 10 times the number of pixels overall. And these are not quite as big as the ones that we're planning for blankout applications, but we have a number of sizes. I don't have it here with me, but that one's probably about 2 foot by 18 inches. Then we have one slightly smaller and then one a little bit smaller. And the intent there is to start to look at different applications for kind of complete streets concepts, focusing on kind of bike and pedestrian information communication. We're still exploring kind of what interesting use cases we can have for those. One in particular, which is where I'm leading based on this question, is dynamic parking enforcement and dynamic delivery zones or specific vehicle restrictions. So we've explored with a few customers now on, can we put the sign up and have dynamic parking fines based on time of day, or can we switch it from a parking to a no parking zone, or to a no stopping or deliveries only or taxi only zone? And I really love that concept, but we've not deployed it yet. Our big focus has been on the blankout sign, but alongside that, we've got a million questions for other concepts like you're specifying there. So if you have other ideas, or even what I mentioned about communicating to pedestrians and bicyclists instead of just drivers, that I think is going to explode over the next couple of years. These signs are insanely versatile, and we're just scratching the surface. This is kind of enhancing a very commonly used application for these signs and making it better. And but I think expanding beyond that, there's a huge potential for what electronic signs, and especially with the kind of the drop in price over the last 10 years, what it's going to open up as far as possibilities. So nothing yet, but we're in conversation for dynamic parking and kind of curbside restrictions, but still still far away from a deployment on those ones.
Do you just want to acknowledge that we're slightly over time? So if you have to leave, that's okay. We're going to be recording the rest of the questions and we'll send it out tomorrow. But we probably will stay on for another 5 minutes and just answer the last few. Someone asked about warranty details.
Yeah, they come with a standard 3-year warranty, which can be expanded however you like. I believe up to 5 or 6 years. But typical warranty would be a 3-year. And custom made requests. Sorry, Sam.
No, I'm going on the next question.
Yeah, so can you make a custom made request? Like Harrison said, these are tiles, LED tiles. The tiles are typically 2 wide and I think 4 to 6 tall. And that's the only restriction. So you can't make it too small and you have to kind of step in, I guess, 16 centimeter or 20 centimeter increments, but we can scale the size up to as big as highway traffic signs where they're across 4 lanes of traffic to as small as the ones you see behind me in Harrison. So absolutely it's possible, and all they have to do is customize the enclosure and they're able to accommodate almost any dimension.
Someone asked about the compatibility for these signs in severe winter weather. For example, in Edmonton, where there are temperatures as low as -30.
Yeah, well, these signs are new to Canada and North America, but they're not new to the rest of the world. So Chainzone, the manufacturer, has extensive deployments in Sweden and Nordics. And if you're not aware, Bermuda is owned by a Signage company, so a lot of our colleagues over there are familiar with driving past these. So they are extremely well tested in severe Nordic conditions. We've had the signs deployed in Calgary, I think, since last September or October, somewhere around there. So they've made it through the winter without any issue. And so we expect that they're going to be extremely robust in our conditions. Yeah, so we have high confidence. Again, we're only a few years into the deployment, but we've gone through a few seasons now without any issue. And so we're very hopeful that these will be a very reliable option.
Someone asked, what would be the added maintenance cost for the dynamic signage? Municipalities would have to weigh that against the marginal improvements in traffic congestion.
I don't know if you want to take that one, Harrison, but I think the spare inventory thing is the massive savings in maintenance.
Yeah, no, it's installing these dynamic signs. If you were to install a dynamic sign digitally versus a fixed sign, you would immediately see savings in inventory management and maintenance for swapping signs out. That's the first easy saving that you would receive. In terms of just installing a new sign as part of your traffic safety plan, whether it be a dynamic sign that's digital or a fixed sign, there will be some maintenance costs. However, there really isn't as much as you expect there to be. These signs, I don't believe they really need to be cleaned. Am I correct, Michael, in saying that you really shouldn't have to go up every season to clean the space of the sign? But other than cleaning, I really don't see much ongoing maintenance that's required, unless I'm wrong there, Michael.
No, well, there's kind of 2 main points on this. Like, one is, as a program, there's the inventory management piece that Harrison touched on earlier. So typically cities have certain kind of maintenance requirements with spare component stock for each sign variant. So Harrison was talking on Calgary, and their big, which was we hadn't thought of until they brought it up to us, was that because of the number of variations of LED blanket signs they have essentially an entire warehouse dedicated to holding 30 or 40 of these blanket sign variations. And their big draw to our sign was not even, I'm sure they liked the fact that it looks way better and all that, but their core interest was the fact that they could take that warehouse and those 40 signs and shrink it down to, say, 5 or 10 that can then be programmed for the different variants that they have. So as a whole, as a program, your spare inventory is going to have a massively lower capital investment required. And then on the actual, for individual sign failures, what you'll notice between the two, I always call it the kind of light bright versus a TV kind of analogy. And so an LED blankout sign, you have kind of a big printed circuit board, and you insert these LEDs in this kind of set, similar like you would a light bright, except you can't move them once they're in there. So what you find with these signs is that an LED will fail, and you can't just, well, maybe you can't replace that LED, but you got to take the sign down, resolder in a new LED, and then reinstall the sign or send it back to the manufacturer if you're not able to swap out LED components yourself. The difference with a BMS sign is that they come with uniform modules. So in this one, there's 3 across, they're more square. The ones Harrison had, they're more rectangular. But you have, call it a matrix of 15 LED modules. So if you have an LED failure, you can open this up, and in about 10 minutes, you can unscrew and remove that LED panel, insert a new one, screw it back in, plug in a power and communication cable, and the sign is fully functional again. And again, I don't really show it, but it's a swing door rear access, or front access actually, when you're mounting from the rear. So you can go up in a bucket truck, open it up, spend, call it half an hour to replace one of the display tiles and install a new one, and the sign's back up and running. And the difference between that and the other one is that they're not modular. Those are the LED signs. It's one big display tile, so you got to take the whole thing out and send the whole thing back to the manufacturer for repair. So there's a lot of advantages to having the BMS, both on inventory as well as just individual sign failures.
Someone asked, are there any settings to change the brightness of the sign if it's facing sunshine?
Yeah. So there is 2 integrated photo cells in each unit, and that is basically a brightness, like what is the amount of ambient light that's being experienced by the sign, and it adjusts the brightness of the display accordingly. Now there are kind of baseline settings that they load in the unit, and those seem to work very well, but there is the ability within the web interface, which is how you kind of configure settings of the unit, to change the thresholds of what certain ambient brightness results in LED brightness. So you can absolutely customize it. We find the default ones are quite good, but you can adjust it to whatever you like.
And that seems to be the end of the questions.
Awesome.
Perfect. Excellent. Well, thank you. Thank you again for the great questions. It was a pleasure. And we'll recirculate answers to the questions. All attendees, a recording of the webinar will be available on YouTube as well. But yeah, if anything else, please feel free to reach out to myself. My email is again harrison.mcdonald@remudidigital.com. Just very quickly, I'll throw that up on the screen again there, and we're at 130 Craigstone Bridge, Ontario. Or Thornhill, Ontario. That's the wrong address there. But thank you again.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye now.